Donald Trump's first State of the Union address was half victory lap, half stories of acts of heroism and promise.
Over the last year, the world has seen what we always knew, that no people on earth are so fearless or daring or determined as Americans. If there is a mountain, we climb it. If there's a frontier, we cross it. If there's a challenge, we tame it. If there's an opportunity, we seize it.
In the end, get this, 75% of people who watched approved of the speech, according to a CBS News poll, and the theme heard throughout was one of unity.
Tonight, I call upon all of us to set aside our differences, to seek out common ground, and to summon the unity we need to deliver for the people.
Of course, not everyone was buying it. In America these days, it's all about where the rubber meets the road. So, will there be any real follow-through? Joining me are two people who were in the audience last night. Jessica Tocco, Senior Vice President of Rasky Partners, who was a guest of the White House. Good to see you. Thanks for coming back. Mohamad Ali, President and CEO of Carbonite, who was a guest of Massachusetts Senator Ed Markey. Good to see you, Mohamad.
Good to see you, too.
Obviously, big fan of the administration, not so much. But having said that, what's it like being in the room? Supreme Court justices, virtually all members of Congress, short a dozen, the President of the United States. I mean, what was that like last night?
I mean, it's incredible. You know, this is America. These are the people that make America work and run, and you just want them to actually work together. You want unity. You want what the President was asking for. And that's why the approval rating is so high, because people want that kind of unity.
Okay, so you were hanging out with the Vice President and the Speaker before you went to the speech. We know all about that. What was it like for you?
It was amazing. It was very humbling to be there, to see all that they've done this year, and to see a lot of the unity that was in the crowd, especially I was up in the rafters, you know, with a lot of the special guests and honorees. To see what they had done and see them bonding was amazing.
Speaking of what they achieved this year, the President obviously talked a lot about what he considered the economic success of year one. Here's the President.
Small business confidence is at an all-time high. The stock market has smashed one record after another, gaining $8 trillion and more in value in just this short period of time. Just as I promised the American people from this podium 11 months ago, we enacted the biggest tax cuts and reforms in American history.
You're a pretty successful CEO. Is he right about the state of the economy? Does he deserve the credit? And do you expect it to continue into 2018?
Look, in business, we know nothing turns on a dime. And so this is a massive country. And to expect that in the last 12 months, you know, the things that our president has done has actually caused this economy to boom, I think is a bit unreasonable. Many things happened before he got here, and we're seeing the benefits of that. Now, having said that, we have the opportunity around this infrastructure idea, the workforce idea, to build for the next decade.
You know, virtually every analysis, fact check, says partially true on these economy things, meaning, as Mohamad said a minute ago, virtually all these trends, including what he thought would be a huge applause line, but not from the Congressional Black Caucus, lowest ever black unemployment rate, virtually all of this trend started under Barack Obama. That is true, is it not? Not that he isn't continuing it, but he's continuing the course that had begun before he was elected. Isn't that fair?
Not necessarily. As soon as he won, as soon as he was elected, and right when he went into office, that's when you saw the stock market, you know, start to be hit out of the park. I mean,
by the way, it went up almost the exact same percentage in the first year of Barack Obama. It's on a much lower base, I should say.
But it continued and continued to where it's been up 5,000 points. It's hit. Not only is it up 5,000 points, it's hit 6 records this year. And look, at the end of the day, I thought it was really sad that folks did not stand up and applaud that the African Americans are, and as well, Hispanic Americans are at the lowest unemployment rate they've ever been. The nation's at the lowest unemployment rate. We should be celebrating and rallying around that.
Well, one thing that arguably there could be bipartisan agreement on, at least conceptually, is what you mentioned a minute ago, infrastructure. He said almost the exact same words last year at the joint session of Congress, he being Donald Trump. But the reality is it's where the rubber hits the road, where the money comes from, and everything we hear is maybe a couple $100 billion from the feds, but a hope to leverage $1 trillion or more from the private sector. Is that real, or is Donald Trump just talking jive here, essentially?
There are structures that work in states and municipalities all over the country, public-private partnerships, matching grants. So what happened last night was that the stage was really set for what was going to go down. They've laid out a plan, and now it's going to be up to Congress to execute it.
Can $200 billion generate $1.5 trillion of infrastructure?
No. So, look, the infrastructure is great, but you have to fund it. And if the mechanism for funding it is through private sector, let's take broadband, for example. The mechanism that the FCC has in mind to fund that is through this whole net neutrality evisceration and giving a tremendous amount of economic power to a small number of carriers. The idea is that those carriers will make a lot of money and then invest in broadband infrastructure. But I guarantee you, rural America will not have multiple sources of broadband. This approach is not going to benefit all Americans.
But that's not the approach for this plan. This plan is raising that money on public-private partnerships, as well as increased accessibility to capital, and then finally they're also doing matching grants. So that's much different than expecting them to make money and then invest it.
But we actually don't know what the plan is.
Well, that's true. They put the plan out. It was on all the transition docs. It came out through the entire election. And so we've seen this point by point by point.
Well, speaking of the point, let's talk about a group of people who may do part of the work, immigrants. And there was a line last night in the speech that the only one I heard, at least, that got boos that you could hear from some part of the Democratic Party. Here's a piece of what the president said about immigration.
Under the current broken system, a single immigrant can bring in virtually unlimited numbers of distant relatives. Under our plan, we focus on the immediate family by limiting sponsorships to spouses and minor children.
He tried to show a kinder and gentler president on immigration. First of all, his facts were wrong here. Some siblings of current immigrants who applied for this under this system 13 years ago are just getting their applications processed. But when you lead with story after story about murders by immigrants, doesn't that destroy the notion that what he's really trying to do is forge some consensus? Isn't he just trying to gin up the base? Isn't that what that was all about?
The way I looked at what he said last night was he was trying to explain himself and explain why. And he said it multiple times. He said multiple times, these are the things I care about, but I put current Americans first. I put Americans first.
Yeah, after describing murders committed by immigrants. And by the way, now let's talk about dreamers.
But those murders were actually committed by those immigrants. Those have actually happened. So he's trying to explain, because, look, we want the best immigrants into this country. H-1Bs, we don't let enough H-1Bs in this country. We educate people and then we send them home in the tech space. That's why we have a tech shortage.
Well, you know a lot about it.
Those are serious issues that should be discussed. Why would you have not as many H-1Bs as you need, but enter a whole bunch of people from gangs?
But stepping back,
I would rather have an H-1B.
The rhetoric for a second, even if this is imperfect, I've talked to you before about immigrant workers and the value. Shouldn't the Democrats, instead of trashing this, say he's met us a third of the way, a quarter of the way, and split the baby and at least get something going after years of rhetorical gridlock?
Yeah, well, first I have to say it was very disappointing as an immigrant myself and as a businessman now, to hear the president equate immigrants to gang members. I was just really taken aback.
With all the MS-13
that was really unnecessary.
Talk about legal immigration.
Let's put that aside. Let's get past that. But, the other thing the president seemed to suggest is the only immigrants we want are the highly educated, the PhDs. But that's not who's created American economy. They are the mechanics and the milkmen and the maids whose children have built America. 40% of Fortune 500 companies were started by an immigrant or a child of an immigrant. 60% of master. We need these people who are not PhD citizens.
But Mohamad, very quickly, if I can, let me get back to my question because I just have a minute left.
Yeah.
This would create a path to citizenship for 1.5 million dreamers. I'm not suggesting other parts of it aren't imperfect, but shouldn't the Democrats say, let's take this, cut a deal, finally have bipartisan something, and then move to the next step? No?
Well, so having the 1.8 million path to citizenship, good thing. But if what you do is you mortgage the future source of immigrants to America, that is a problem. I mean, for 200, 300 years, immigrants have made up this country, and you can't just shut them off the way he wants to shut it off.
Somebody feels a little bit differently about this. We only have a minute left. Here's a little bit of what a guy said in Fall River last night in rebuttal.
Politicians can be cheered for the promises they make, our country will be judged by the promises we keep.
Now, we know you didn't see this last night because you're a little bit busy, but you did watch it. Quick review of Joe Kennedy.
I think he did a great job. I think it was good for him to position himself amongst the Democrats as a young and up-and-comer. I think they need some up-and-comers like that for the
How about
party.
you?
I thought it was great. You know, Bill Hewlett, who founded Hewlett-Packard, had the philosophy of and. You build high-quality product and you ship it on time. And that's what he's talking about when he says both. We have to do that. And in America, we can do both and we can do and.
Let's end on agreement. That's wonderful. Jessica, nice to see you. Great to see you, Mohamad. Thanks so
See
much
you
for
too.
being here. Appreciate it.